Eamonn Holmes had always been the kind of man who brought comfort just by showing up. His voice, his humor, his calm confidence, these were the things viewers relied on to start their mornings with a sense of reassurance. For decades, he lifted the spirits of millions with that distinct blend of warmth and quick wit that seemed to come so effortlessly to him. But what no one could see behind the polished smile and the steady voice was the emotional weight he'd been carrying, one that grew heavier with each passing year. Only one person sensed the full storm brewing behind his quiet pauses and forced jokes: his wife, Ruth Langford. Their love had always been the kind people admired: strong, playful, warm, the kind of partnership built on years of teasing each other, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at things no one else understood, and holding each other during the moments when the world felt a little too heavy. But recently, something inside their home had shifted. Eamonn's health struggles, something he had been battling quietly, determined not to make a fuss, had intensified. He had pushed through countless appointments, treatments, and days when his body simply refused to cooperate. The pain was real, but even worse was the emotional toll of feeling like he wasn't himself anymore. He didn't want Ruth to worry, so he put on his usual charm. He joked through the discomfort. He pretended everything was fine. But Ruth saw everything he tried to hide. One evening, after a long day that left him more drained than usual, Eamonn finally reached a moment he could no longer smooth over with humor. He sat on the edge of their bed, shoulders slumped, breathing slowly as if gathering the courage to finally speak the truth he had kept locked inside. Ruth sat beside him without a word, sensing something important was coming. She took his hand gently, and that was all it took for Eamonn's guard to crumble. He confessed how scared he had been feeling, not from anything catastrophic, but for the possibility that his health might never return to what it once was. He worried about being limited, slowed down, held back from the life the two of them had dreamed of, talked about, and planned for years. He admitted he felt guilty on the days when he couldn't move freely, guilty when she had to help him with tasks he used to do without thinking, guilty that the life they shared now felt different, heavier, and unpredictable. Then he looked at her and said something he had been holding inside for too long. He didn't want her world to shrink because his had. Not because he was preparing for something tragic, but because the fear of becoming a burden ate at him more deeply than he ever admitted. He wanted their life together to stay full, full of joy, full of adventure, full of the little things that made them, them. He wanted her to promise that they would keep moving forward as a team, even when days were difficult, even when he needed help, even when things weren't perfect. It wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't a final message. It was a vulnerable request from a man terrified of losing himself and losing the sparkle he always brought into their marriage. Ruth felt her heart crack open, not because of the words themselves, but because she could finally see how much he had been carrying alone. She had always admired his strength, but this version of him, honest, fragile, open, made him love him even more deeply than before. She wrapped her arms around him and promised him something of her own, that she wasn't going anywhere, that they would navigate every twist of this journey together, that she didn't see him as a burden, not now, not ever, that he was her partner, her best friend, her favorite person, and that no physical challenge could ever change that. She wiped his tears, and he wiped his, and for the first time in months, the tension in the room dissolved. They talked for hours, more openly than they had in a long time. They talked about fears, dreams, future plans, and even embarrassingly funny stories from the early years of their marriage. At one point, Ruth joked that if he thought she'd ever let him push her away, he clearly didn't know her at all. And that made Eamonn laugh so hard he actually forgot about the pain for a moment. It was the kind of laughter that felt healing. Friends close to the couple noticed the change in them almost immediately. They seemed closer, softer, more affectionate, more aware of how precious every second together truly was. They started spending more time doing things they loved, slow walks, casual outings, quiet mornings before the world woke up. They cooked dinner side by side more often, even when Eamonn jokingly claimed that Ruth's cooking was a national treasure for all the wrong reasons. She threw a dish towel at him. He limped away dramatically as if escaping danger, and she chased after him laughing, careful but determined, not ready to let health challenges steal the fun they always shared. Behind the scenes, Ruth became fiercely protective, not in a way that made Eamonn feel weak, but in the way of a partner who loves deeply enough to stand guard through any storm. She organized appointments, made sure he rested, and reminded him constantly that needing help didn't mean losing independence. Eamonn, in return, let himself slow down. He allowed space for recovery, comfort, and honesty, tools he'd ignored for too long. He started looking at himself differently, not as someone diminished, but as someone worthy of care, worthy of gentleness, worthy of the love Ruth had always given him without hesitation. And their bond, already strong, became something even more powerful. They rediscovered parts of their relationship that had been buried under years of busy schedules and pressure. They talked more, held hands more, shared deeper conversations. Sometimes they stayed up late just reminiscing about old memories, some emotional, some hilarious, some absolutely ridiculous. Eamonn often teased that Ruth was becoming a professional warrior, to which she'd respond, "And you're becoming a professional drama queen." He'd press a hand to his chest and gasp dramatically. She'd burst into laughter, and just like that, the heaviness lifted. Although the road ahead remains uncertain, one thing is undeniably true. Eamonn is not facing this chapter alone. He is surrounded by a partner whose loyalty burns brighter than ever. A woman who refuses to let fear define their future. A woman who continues to fight for his happiness even on the days he struggles to find it himself. And Eamonn, in his vulnerable honesty, gave her something priceless. The truth of what he'd been feeling and the invitation to face it together. Their story isn't about endings. It isn't about loss. It isn't about finality. It's about devotion. It's about courage. It's about the kind of love that endures even when life becomes complicated, messy, and unpredictable. And most of all, it's about choosing each other, again and again, no matter how uncertain the path ahead might be.